So Mandy Friedman here, licensed professional clinical counselor, clinically certified domestic violence counselor, clinically certified trauma professional level 2, and the creator of SNAP, Survivors of Narcissistic and Abusive Personalities. I'm back with my brother, Andrew. Hi, Andrew.
Hey, Mandy. If you don't know, I'm Andrew, Mandy's brother, and those are my qualifications.
And today we are talking about Tom Wambsgans, Season 2, Succession. And he's my favorite character, so I'm so excited to be talking about him. Let's get started.
Tom has an interesting season 2, and we learn a lot about him. But when he starts the season, he is on his honeymoon with Shiv on a giant yacht.
When we first see this yacht, I'm just like, wow. And then in season 2, we get to be on the yacht a couple of times. But we start off on the yacht, on his honeymoon with Shiv. And they're very distracted, like you said, about what's going on with Kendall. Kendall has just been called back from Norway, where he was there for like 2 days trying to recover from the accident in the lake with the kid that died. Okay. So now he's back and he is being the spokesperson and giving a statement, and they're watching it and they're kind of flipping out, but they're not really focused on the honeymoon at all. They're not really focused on why they're there. And that's kind of hard to watch a little bit. You can just see their relationship deteriorating on their honeymoon.
There's a lot of things that are more important to them than their relationship. In fact, most things are more important to them than their relationship. Another interesting thing that happens this season is that Tom kind of fancies himself maybe the new CEO. And there's a couple different reasons why he wants to propose himself as that. But he is in competition with his wife because she wants to be the new CEO too.
Shiv is approached by Logan, and he does some future faking with her, making her think she's going to be the CEO, and things get tossed around. But at some point, Tom starts to throw his own name out there and is really just sort of seeing how everybody reacts to that. He tosses it out, but it doesn't seem that serious about it, but you can tell he kind of is. But he's just throwing spaghetti at the wall, seeing what sticks.
Logan has this big idea, this white whale of his. He wants to acquire the other media company called Pierce, all right? And a lot of people maybe think it's not the best idea, including Shiv. But she doesn't want to say that. So she kind of uses Tom as her own little flying monkey to float the idea of shooting down Logan's idea with Pierce.
She sends Tom as a flying monkey. She says, you got to tell Dad this is not a good idea. And he's not real happy about this assignment and tells her that he doesn't want to do it. And that's when she says, oh, my meat puppet isn't working. So, she's trying to manipulate him. And when he's kind of pushing back, like, nah, I feel like you're manipulating me and I don't really want to do that. And then she has to make fun of him, essentially, and objectify him. That, oh, can you call the replica department? My meat puppet isn't working. You're not a real person. You're an object, which is a theme for today's episode, I feel.
It is. And Tom, throughout the season, is building resentment. And this is a part of it right here. We also, Shiv goes on a little adventure where she has a tryst with some actor, and she chooses the moment when Tom's the most vulnerable to just tell him this, manipulating him. And it is sad, and he gets upset.
It was Shiv that was sent to confront Connor about what Connor was doing. We remember that's the hyper decanting scene. She shows up where Connor is. He's meeting with his campaign team, and she's saying, could you just stop? We're kind of embarrassed, and this isn't good for everybody. Can you please stop? Well, he's not hearing it, but Willa's still there, and she starts talking to Willa, and she's not really getting too far. Willa says, oh, I have to go. I'm leaving. I'm meeting some friends for drinks. And Shiv's like, okay, I'll go too then. And just invites herself. And that's when she meets one of the actors. They have an evening together. And you're right. There's a moment when Tom is trying to talk to Shiv. And that's when she lets him know, oh, by the way, I slept with someone.
There aren't too many characters in Succession that you actually feel sympathy for. But Tom's one of them. At times you just think, man, you got yourself in this terrible mess, But we see a scene where Tom is using a person, one of his underlings, as human furniture.
Exactly. So more objectification. Tom is got one of his underlings on all fours in an office, and feet are up on this person as a human coffee table. Greg comes in and is trying to talk to Tom about something, and Tom invites Greg to join him. Here, put your feet up. And Greg goes along with it, but he feels a little uncomfortable. He doesn't really like the whole human furniture thing, but Tom thinks it's great. He's got no problem with it.
By inviting Greg to join him in this objectification of this person, he's kind of grooming Greg to teaching him the ways of being an asshole, basically.
Yeah, he's been doing that the whole time. He's been grooming Greg. And this is another example because he invites Greg to join him to do the same thing with him. So now he's like an accomplice. This is a we thing. We do this now. And that's how abusers groom people, is they get you to join in and be on board somehow, make you think that you're a part of, or that you somehow made a decision to be here too. But yeah, I mean, him saying, come on in, put your feet up. He's basically saying, this is how we treat people, and this is how I'm going to treat you.
Tom is the boss of ATN, and they have a gentleman who is on their network who they suspect of being a secret Nazi, maybe not so secret.
Andrew, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but Nazis are acceptable these days. Yeah. It's like, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, you can full well know somebody has these views, or should we say beliefs, and yet it makes it all okay. We're still okay with it. Gonna go ahead and green light that. And we're seeing this in succession on ATN, where they have this talking head, like you said, is accused of, and pretty obviously has these sorts of views. So Tom is sent to interview him to sort of suss it out and see if it's true. And he's interviewing him, and he does a really good job interviewing him, I feel. And the way he asked the questions were really good too. We start to see more EQ from Tom. When I say EQ, I mean emotional intelligence. The way he navigates people is pretty crafty. The way he asked those questions of the Nazi was very crafty. But he's saying to him, why are you drawn to these things? The guy says, well, it's an interesting period in history. I'm just interested in it. He says, well, what are you interested? What's interesting about it? And he says, well, lots of loss of life. And which lives specifically are you talking about? And he starts to name the Poles and, the Polish and the Americans and other people and other populations that passed away or were murdered. And he fails to mention the Jews that were, the genocide that took place during World War II. So that's not mentioned. And at that point, Tom says, I think your math might be a little off. So he's not quite confronting, but he certainly is, willing to bring it up. And right at that time is where we hear gunshots.
This is when we learn that there's been some kind of shooting in the ATM building. How does Tom react to this?
Tom starts pushing people out of the way to get his own self to safety. And he's even saying something like, this is executive business, out of the way, executives coming through, and he's just pushing people out of the way to get to the safe room. And that's what this episode is called, a safe room. And him and Greg end up in a room together with a couple other people, and they start to realize that this isn't the safe room. But there is a safe room. We find that Logan's there and Shiv's there, and Rhea winds up being there too. But Tom is not in the safe room. He realizes, I think, more in the situation how he is alone. He's not protected. No one's coming to rescue him. And right at this time is when Greg approaches him with his idea that he would like to move on to a different department. And Tom says, are you breaking up with me, Greg? They have a big fight. So I guess it's not a fight. It's more just Tom pummeling him with water bottles. And when someone tries to step in to protect Greg, Tom's like, this doesn't involve you. This is executive business, But yeah, I mean, he does not respond well when Greg says that he wants to break up.
This parallels the scene earlier, too, where Tom was at a low point and Shiv was like, well, this is the best time to tell him terrible news. You know, maybe I'm going to leave you or something like that. And so it's interesting how Tom's repeating these scenarios in his life. Maybe there's something to learn there. We have a big meeting. Logan is upset that people are not falling in line, and he lets everybody know to know their role. And what does that mean for Tom?
Well, first, let me just say what's happening when he says know your role. They're going to turn Haven to have a meeting with Nan Pierce for this takeover of Pierce. And before they're entering the house and they're about to go put on their show, Logan says to everyone, know your role. And I just think it's really important that we recognize toxic family systems exist in a way that you have to play your role. You have to play your part. And if you've ever been in a toxic family system and tried to leave that toxic family system, or tried to voice your concerns or be yourself, or, you know, fall outside of the norm, you see what kind of a backlash that you get. So I like that this was just overtly said, know your role. Now, what is Tom's role? Tom's role, he's trying to figure that out, I feel. At one minute, he thinks that he's supposed to be like the conservative jerk that's going to run ATN and sort of take the heat for being that. Another minute, he's wondering if his role is going to be to, you know, be a scapegoat. I think that's part of what he's trying to figure out is, what is his role? Where does he fit in, including with Shiv?
He doesn't know what his role is in his own marriage. And that is a fascinating dynamic that we get to explore in this season with his feelings and not ours, which is nice. So Tom and Greg get together. They're going to have a big meeting. They're going to figure out this slogan. So ATN has a new slogan. And at the time that they're working on this, it's like, we are here for you. Or we hear for you. And they keep, they're not sure which word here they're going to use, H-E-R-E or H-E-A-R. Why are they worried about that, Mandy?
Because they are actually listening to people. I guess they must have their own kind of a device that's like an Alexa or, you know, Google Home. And they are actually listening. And this is starting to come to the surface. You'll notice that they just have this way of squirming out of things, right? There's something that will be raised that, oh no, there's this thing happening and they've done these wrong things, you know, wrongdoings, crimes, or violations. And they're like, nah, not really. It's not that. And this is another example of that right around this time is when it's starting to come out that they are actually listening to people in their private homes. And so when they come up and they say, we hear you, or we hear for you, then they realize, oh, wait, we can't say that really, because that makes it seem like that we're signing on to what they're saying. So this is a great example of how they like to control the narrative. They're really good at controlling the narrative by just changing the wording, changing the language. But we hear you, we hear for you, whatever it is, it's all word salad anyway. It doesn't mean anything anyhow. They're trying to come up with a nothing burger, but their nothing burger continues to have some little pinpoint of truth to it. So they have to erase all of that and make it a nothing burger, because that's when they do best, is when things aren't real, they're not true, it's not based in fact. They need for there to be lots of smoke and mirrors and obfuscation for them to get away with the things they're getting away with. So the fact that it's we here for you, or we are here for you, whether it's H-E-R-E or H-E-A-R, it doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't even really matter. But you see them squirming to, well, we can't call attention to what we're guilty of.
They're always weaseling their way out of trouble, and even trouble that's imagined. Which, you know, the listening device is not imaginary, but them getting scrutinized over some silly, you know, slogan is something they're imagining possibly happening, right? So it's pretty funny. One thing that is also really happening is that Tom is called in front of the Senate for his hearing about Mo Lester. And Gil, the senator, he grills Tom about it. And Tom gets asked about the human furniture and has a pretty funny response.
Tom isn't doing very well with the interview either. He's kind of he's mealy mouth. He's not making sense. That's okay, though. That's the thing is, like, even though he's sort of bombing it, it's a nothing burger. It's just he looks like an ass, but he still didn't give them anything. He didn't make the problem worse. So in a way, I think it went well that he didn't do that well. But he does say in the Senate hearing, when Senator Evis brings it up, he says, I use a variety of target-oriented incentives to enhance optimal performance. So controlling the narrative, word salad there, target-oriented incentives to enhance optimal performance.
That means nothing.
Doesn't really mean anything. But you'd see how he just regurgitated that, it just came out, because that's how he's used to talking. He speaks that way. That's how he does his job. All the stupid speeches that he's giving whenever he's with his group of people, he comes into the conference room and he's talking. Anytime he gets in front of people to talk, it's all nonsense. It doesn't really make any sense. He's just throwing out words that sound like a certain thing, but if you really listen to what's being said, it's nothing.
So earlier in the season, we talked about how Shiv had revealed that she had this tryst with the actor. She's offered something up to Tom as kind of a way to control him, but also a reward, but also payback maybe for her cheating on him. And what it is that she wants to have a threesome with him and another lady. But Tom doesn't want that.
They're back on the yacht. We get to see the yacht again, which is amazing. But this time they're on the yacht because this is when the cruise crimes are starting to come up, and it's after the Senate hearings. It's clear they're going to need a scapegoat. So everyone is sequestered to the yacht. And one of the things they were, that Shiv seemed like she was looking forward to was, let's have a threesome with one of the staff.
Good point.
But Tom says, I'm not really feeling naughty tonight. And he tells her that he doesn't really want to have a threesome. And you can see that Tom genuinely loves Shiv in these moments, because Shiv thinks that this is going to be a good playing chip, that by offering this, that's somehow manipulating him, like, oh, she's the best wife ever, that she lets me do these things, that's how she's going to hold power over him by being permissive. But he doesn't really like that. He's a Midwestern guy, steak and potatoes. That's what they make fun of him for. And I'm sure that the way he was raised is in a traditional gender role situation where you're not having threesomes and you're not in a polyamorous marriage with their swingers. I think he probably wants something that's more traditional, but he starts to speak up more now about what he likes and what he doesn't like. He's not just going along with things the way he was. And that's when her meat puppet isn't working, is when he's not going along with what she wants to do.
It's a fascinating dynamic between those two when these kinds of things come up. Because like you said, it's Shiv trying to reward him, but also trying to control him. We talked about how Tom doesn't know what his role in the marriage is, but we're seeing it a little more clearly here. It's becoming less foggy, and Shiv is starting to get more foggy for her because she doesn't know how to do this either. And that's a fascinating part of the show. Tom in general is very rude to staff and people that he considers below him. He and Shiv are searching for the perfect private cove, which is ironic because they have a driver. They have a boat captain that's, driving them around, and they're trying to find privacy somewhere. And he keeps telling them, oh, this isn't good enough. Tell me a little bit about Tom's rudeness towards people and how that works into his dynamics.
Tom is really into the hierarchy of power and establishing where people are in that ladder and where he is. And then when there are people that are under him, he has to make sure that they know that they are under him. So he's very much into that. He is at the low rung when we first meet him. Then Greg shows up, then we have Willa. So there are people in the family that wind up being beneath him. And then he makes sure that they know that they are beneath him. But he also does it with the staff. We see it the night before their wedding, or the day before their wedding, when that bus pulls in and it can't pull in far enough. So he gives the people a really hard time about that. But yeah, he is really shitty to the people that work for them. And they're already on a yacht trip, but they have like a side yacht trip to their yacht trip on a separate boat that just isn't good enough for him. And he rudely, orders the captain to keep going so they can find their own perfect private cove.
When I see Tom doing this, that he's just copying what he thinks rich people act like. And in particular, the male members of the Roy family are constantly rude to anyone that they feel like is below them. I mean, we saw what happened when Kendall tried to hang out with people who are below him. So it's like, it's not good for them, right? So, and Logan, of course, is the same way. And so I feel like he's just kind of copying what he thinks Shiv wants in a man and what he thinks that everybody should see him as.
They finally find their cove. And this is when they have a difficult conversation about their marriage, but it's also where we see more of that emotional intelligence that comes out, that separates Tom from the rest of them. I think it's important to make this distinction more and more as the series progresses, because we want to know, how does Tom wind up where he winds up? I mean, that's the question in the end, isn't it? Like, wow, how did we get here? Well, we can go back and look and see how we got that. He is much savvier than they are when it comes to navigating people. Now, he does treat people terribly. He does use them as footstools. Don't get me wrong. He's a bully. He's bullying Greg. He's grooming Greg. But at the same time, he is also able to be self-aware to a degree that they are not able to be aware. And he's also able to navigate his own emotions and know himself well enough and be able to speak about it. We see that here, as it's almost like he's realizing that she doesn't really love him, but he does seem to love her. And he gets a little bit emotional when he's talking to her. And he says, I think a lot of the time, if I think about it, I really am pretty unhappy. Now, that doesn't seem like much to most people, but the fact that he can locate that within himself and say, step outside of that, you can look at yourself from a different perspective and go, I don't think I'm happy here. But furthermore, he says something that really stuck with me, and that is, I wonder if the sad I would be without you would be less than the sad I get from being with you. That's a complex concept for him to recognize within himself, be able to step outside of himself, his relationship, and see it for what it is. I feel like that's when we really meet Tom, and we can see in him what gives him the advantage over others. It's just a little scene with those two on the cove, and it's when he's honestly speaking about how he feels finally more and more. But it's also important in his own character development from our perspective, because we're seeing the skills that it takes to navigate in this sea of sharks where he's swimming. You've got to have some emotional intelligence to gain the upper hand over those that do not have the emotional intelligence. The Roy kids don't have it. He does, and it's because he has more perspective. He wasn't raised the way they were. He was still very well off. He still did really well. You can tell that's where he comes from, but he has a better perspective of the world than they have, because he doesn't have as much of a sheltered existence as they have had.
This is also the moment where Tom finally comes clean about his happiness in his marriage. And we've talked about, from the very beginning of this episode, we've talked about his role in their marriage. And here he's kind of taken the reins a little bit. And it's a rare, honest moment on the show from two people who at the beginning of the season they could not be honest about each other, with each other, about whether they wanted to leave their honeymoon or not. They're both lying to each other. Well, I don't want to. You wouldn't want to. We wouldn't want to do it. They can't even be honest with themselves about that. And here we have a rare, honest moment that really hits hard emotionally if you're watching this show. And it's great.
The conversation in the Cove ends with, maybe we're not going to be together anymore. And Shiv says, I'll tell Dad. And Tom says, no, I will tell Logan. Now, this may not seem important right now, but later on, we find out why it's important that he's the one that approaches Logan. And I want to pull us back to the larger topic here, which is we're talking about a toxic family system. We're talking about abusive and manipulative individuals who treat people like they're objects, and that they're just there to control the narrative and to win. Now let's throw in a divorce and children and assets. Later on, we find out why it's so important that he's the one that talks to Logan. And it shows us how malevolently creative these types are in crushing their opponents, in crushing their enemies, and the lengths they're willing to go in order to win.
Tom's in a little bit of a war here, the war of succession. And he crosses the battle lines and maybe makes the first power move.
This is one of Tom's best scenes. We're back on the yacht, and the Senate hearings have not gone well. And it's starting to really sink in with him that he's going to be the scapegoat here. Maybe not the CEO, but the scapegoat, which is not really the direction he was hoping this would go. Tom looks upset and is acting strangely. Logan's just had his dinner served, and Tom sits right down next to him. And Logan even notices that he's acting weird, and he's like, Tom, are you okay? Then Tom reaches and grabs a chicken wing off of Logan's plate and takes a bite out of it, and then puts the half-eaten chicken wing back on his plate. And Logan looks very surprised and is like, what the fuck? And then Tom puts his sunglasses on and says, thank you, Logan. Thank you very much for the chicken. In the classes that I teach about narcissistically abusive relationships, we talk about countermeasures. And countermeasures are the things you do when there's like a power imbalance and you're trying to balance it out somehow. It can be a silly little thing that you wouldn't normally do. And I would say Tom would not normally act this way. He's acting a little out of character. He's normally much smoother around Logan. He's much more polished around Logan. He's more careful around Logan. He would never, ever piss Logan off. He's very careful around Logan. And yet in this moment, he is just pissed. He's thinking, if I'm going to take the fall for this, at least I can have a bite of chicken. But it just was really great, really weird, really strange. And Shiv was disturbed by it also. Everybody just sort of looking at him like, huh? But what I am seeing is someone who's more empowered, someone who is being a little more honest, someone who recognizes the power imbalances and is not liking it as much. He likes being in the vicinity. Power via proximity is what he's aiming for. But that comes at a cost. You have to submit. You have to bow down. You have to let go of yourself, actually, and what you think, what you want. Your own humanity has to go. There's a lot that you have to cast aside in these moments in order to get where he's trying to go.
You have to become human furniture and willing to make others human furniture.
Indeed.
It's pretty great to see Tom take a little bit of his power back, even if it's something, I mean, it wasn't filet. It wasn't sea bass. It was a fucking chicken wing.
Or a bird embryo.
Right.
It was just a chicken wing.
Yeah.
But, that's where Tom comes from.
Well,
I bet you he had his fair share of wings growing up in the Midwest. Our next episode is about Greg. I'm so excited to talk about Greg because we see the two of them, Tom and Greg, and how they progress. They really work together. They work against each other. They're flying monkeys. There's abuse happening. There's grooming going on, and it's quite entertaining. So our next episode, we will focus on Greg the egg. And one of the really cool lines was, you can't make a Tomlet without breaking some Gregs. And thank you so much for watching or listening. Goodbye.